So man, that's a lot. I know this is a lot. Hopefully you're hanging in there with me. Okay, so what did we do? We performed our BLE scan. The next thing I'm going to do is write some callbacks for the scan. Because right now, okay, hey, we're performing a scan, but like nothing's happening. I want something to happen, right? So what we're going to do is create an advertised device callback. So every time we find a device, we're going to do something. So I'll write some code and then we'll talk about it. All right, so I added a couple lines of code, which we'll be talking about now. And I also adjusted the font size. I made it a little bit bigger because I really want to try to focus in on these lines. If it's too big, let me know in the comments. Maybe we can adjust for future videos. But all right, here goes. So first thing I did is I added this line of code down here right after we created our BLE scan object, after we grabbed it from the BLE device. And what this line does is it sets the advertised device callbacks for our scan. Now, a callback is simply something, usually it's a function, that gets executed every time a specific thing, like some event happens. And in this case, these callbacks are for advertised devices, and they're part of our scan. And so the event that will trigger these callbacks is as you're performing a scan, when it identifies a device that is advertising. That is, it's going to execute this callback. So it's scanning, maybe it finds a device. Oh, hey, execute this callback. It keeps scanning, finds another device. Hey, execute those callbacks again. And every time the callback gets executed, information about that advertised device, the advertising information, remember we were talking about the passive and active stuff, that advertising data, that's going to be available to us in our callback. So now let's go ahead and just take a look at the callback specifically. Okay, so here it is right here, and the syntax is a little intimidating. I know we talked about callbacks previously in the lessons when we were talking about client, so I'm really not going to go into it too much, but basically this BLE advertised callback is a virtual function in our BLE device library. And what that means is we're able to overwrite it, and we're able to overwrite the functions inside of that class, which in this case are onResult. So basically, what it allows us to do is say, hey, when we find a device, this is what we want to do. We're going to tell you what we want to do. All we have to do is follow the specific functions and the parameters they set for us. For example, the function inside our callback needs to be named onResult, and it needs to take a BLE advertised device as the parameter, and it's going to return void. So I know that's probably clear as mud. Hopefully, we talked about it a bit more in the client lessons. Hopefully that kind of carries over. If not, you can review those. Okay, so when we find a device, what do? Well, what we're going to do is just print off information about that advertised device. And a really easy way to do that is to use this toString function that's part of an advertised device. Now, an advertised device is like another object in this library. It's got its own functions and data associated with it. And if you haven't noticed, there's all types of classes inside this library, and it can get really confusing at times. And so what's really helped me think about and explore these different classes is to look at the source code for this BLE library. So I'll link to this. This is the supported library by Espressif for the Arduino ESP32 library that we're working with here. And you can see all these files right here. This is all the source code, right? So far we've been working with the BLE device and the BLE client. That's what we're working with now, but the BLE server's in here, and we've got advertising. We were just talking about advertising, but here's this BLE advertised device. So if you look at the source code, you can see the different functions and data associated with it, right? So if you're wondering, hey, what can I do with a BLE advertised device? Well, you can come to the source code, take a look, and look at the different functions associated with it. I don't know. That's what I've been doing a lot. It's been super helpful for me. But that's how I learned, like, okay, hey, this object has a toString function, because I just looked at the documentation, and you come through here, and down here it says toString, and it returns a string. So what this is going to do is take some of the data associated with the advertised device, turn it into a string so that you can print it to the serial monitor. Okay, so what I'm going to do is open up our serial monitor, and I'm going to reset our ESP32. I've already uploaded this code, and then we'll see what shows up on the serial monitor here. Okay, so we print off BLE advertised device. Ooh, fount instead of found. Okay, found. Well, fount. We found it. All right, anyway. So what this prints off is the name, right? And looks like we found, I have that other server running. We called it the CIA monitoring device. It gives us the address. It gives us the service UID, the power, and then the RSSI, which is like the signal strength. So you can see it did it for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different devices is what it found in my office here. And it looks like only one other one had a name called mesh device, but you can see you're going to get the address of all of them. Some of them had manufacturing data, but that's what this device callback's doing. We could do something totally different in here. Maybe we want to blink an LED every time we connect to a device. Maybe you want to sound a piezo buzzer every time you find a device. That's actually a lot of fun. You get it to beep in interesting ways. You can do whatever you want, but in our case, this is what we're doing for starters. Okay, so we've created the device callback. Hopefully that was helpful. All right, so we created that, great, and then we printed off the device info. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create our client, and then we're going to create some client callbacks. And I think what I'm also going to do is set our target service and target UUID. So let me do that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so I wrote some code for creating our client. So if you recall, the first thing we did is we created a device. We initialized our device. Then we did our scan and performed a scan, set it active, started it, all that great stuff. And now we're actually creating our client. And our client is what's going to connect to a server, get information about that server. So this first line of code right here that we added for the client, notice it's a lot like getting the scan, right? In this case, though, we're creating a client. It's going to return a pointer, so we save it into a BLE Client pointer variable. All right, so we've got our client. It's named pClient. Then what we do is we are going to set some callbacks for our client. Same way we did with the My Advertised Devices, but the client callbacks give us some different functions. Let's go ahead and look at the My Client callbacks. Again, the syntax is pretty much the exact same as before. We're making a class. We're overwriting that BLE Client callbacks virtual class. And now the two functions that we can write are onConnect and onDisconnect. So what this means is that anytime our client connects to a server, then this function right here, onConnect, is going to get executed. And every time our client disconnects from a server, it's going to run this code right here, this onDisconnect. And all I'm doing is printing some stuff off. I turn on an LED when we're connected, and I turn off an LED when we're not connected. So again, callbacks, they get executed when an event happens. And in this case, it's the client events, and those two client events that we're interested in here are the onConnect and the onDisconnect. Okay, but what we haven't done is actually connected our client to a server. So we scanned for devices, we created our client, but now we have to say, hey client, we want you to connect to a specific server. Now the way we're going to do it in this program, again, this program, I'm trying to show you the very basics of this client, how to connect to stuff. Now the way we are going to connect to a device is by actually hard coding the service UUID that we're looking for. Now in a previous lesson, like I mentioned, we were working with ESP32 servers. And so for that server, we created a service that had a specific UUID. That's like the ID associated with that service on that device. And so what we're going to do in our code is every time in our advertised device callback, we're going to check if the device we found advertises that specific UUID. And if it does, we're going to say, hey, this is the device we want to connect to, and then we'll go ahead and connect to that device. So let me write some code and then we'll talk about it. Hopefully it'll make it a little bit more clear. Definitely check out programmingelectronics.com. We have got some great training there that can get you up to speed fast with programming with Arduino and building cool projects and stuff like that. All right, so I wrote quite a bit of code here. We're going to talk about it. And just remember, it's okay if this gets a little bit confusing. This is all part of it. But the payoff, learning how to use this BLE stuff, there's a huge payoff because you can make a lot of interesting stuff with it. Okay, so there's my disclaimer. I'm going to do my best to help explain this, but it's a little technical. Sometimes I trip over myself, but anyway. Okay, so let me start at the top here. First, what I did is I added 3 global variables. The first is our target UUID service, and then the other one is our target UUID characteristic. So I pulled these values from the server sketch. So it's around here somewhere. Here we go. Here's the server sketch that we worked on, and here's the UUIDs for the service and the characteristic that we defined. We said, hey, this is what this service is going to advertise. And now what we're doing in our client is we're saying, hey, this is the service I'm looking for. This is what I want to learn about. I want to read that information. Notice that the type here is BLE UUID, right? We didn't just save this as a string. This is the name of the variable. We pass in the string data and we get our BLE UUID. So now we can refer to this and the type is this BLU UUID. And a lot of the functions in the library require you to pass in this type of object. Okay, so we created this. Notice that I made these static. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. If it was me, I wouldn't have made these static. But in all the example code that comes with the BLE library, when they create clients, they make the BLE UUIDs static. The reason I think they're doing it is because they don't want there to be some type of naming issues going on with other files sharing that same, like service UUID kind of thing. But anyway, I'm just going to stick with what they had. All right, the third global variable I made is a BLE advertised device. It's a pointer target device. And we made this a pointer, so I should put a P in front of that. Let me rename that symbol. All right, so we're just going to have to manually do it. All right, so there's P target device. Okay, just trying to remain consistent here. So target device is a pointer, and it points to type BLE advertised device. Now, if you'll recall, in our my advertised device callback, so remember when we perform a scan, this is the callback that's going to get executed when a new device is found that's advertising. And what we get for that advertised device is a BLE advertised device. So, okay, so notice how these match. All right. So what we're going to do now in our advertised device callbacks is we are going to run a check, and we're going to say, hey, this advertised device I just found. We're going to say, hey, do you have a service UUID? We just want to make sure it even has one, right? We're going to say, yeah, do you have one? Okay, let's say it has one. Good. Then we want to say, hey, are you advertising this specific service? And the service we're interested in is this one right here. We're saying this is what we're on the lookout for. So again, every time we scan for something, we're going to ask that device. We're going to say, hey, are you the service we're looking for? And if it is the service we're looking for, what we're going to do is create a new BLE advertised device using the information from this advertised device that we have access to when we perform the scan, on this callback. And we're going to save that to P target device. Now, I know that seems a little odd, right? I know, a little bit confusing. Let me try to say that again. All right, so this callback gets called every time a new device that's advertising is identified. All right, what information do we have available inside this callback? Well, in this onResult function in here, we have access to the advertised device data, right? So this is going to be like any information. It might be advertising. Maybe it's address, its name, manufacturer data, all that type of stuff, right? So we have access to that specific device's advertising data. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at that specific device and we're going to say, hey, are you the one we're looking for? Because we know which one we're looking for. Are you the one we're looking for? And if it is, then what we're going to do is we're going to take all that device, we're going to take it, and we're going to create a new object and save it. We're going to save all that information. We're going to save its address, its service UUID, anything that it provides. We're going to save it into our own little global variable here called P target device, right? That we made up here because it's a BLE advertised device. And notice we're using the new operator here when we create this. And the reason is this advertised device right here in this function, its life is going to be gone after this function ends, right? So advertised device is just local to this function right here. And if we just set P target device equal to advertised device, or a pointer to advertised device, whatever, right? Well, then our pointer would be pointing to something that didn't exist after this function exited, right? So we actually have to make a new instance of a BLE advertised device, and we're going to use this advertised device to make it. So I don't know if that made any sense or not. I hope it makes a little bit sense, but the bottom line is we are grabbing the device that matches the service UUID that we're looking for. We're going to grab that device information. Okay, so that's what we do in this callback. So now we've got that device information, and now what we can do when we come down to setup is we can actually connect to that target device. So we're just going to pass in that device. And when we pass in a device to the connect function, it's going to find the address that's associated with that device for the target device, and it's going to connect to it. And then what we do is we just print off, hey, we're connected to, and then again, we've got access to this target device so we can get the name. We're just going to go ahead and print off the name. Now, I want to make a quick note. Actually, I want to make a couple notes here. I'm not being super safe in a lot of cases here. Okay, and the reason I'm not being super safe is because there's just a lot of code that goes into being like guarded, being smart when you're doing this, basically. Okay, so what am I talking about? So before we ask to get the name of this target device, first we should check, does it have a name? Because it might not have a name. So what we ought to do, if we were smart, is we would say, hey, target device, do you have a name? So we check, hey, do you have a name? And then if it has a name, then we would ask to get the name. Because if we ask for a name and there's no name there, because what we do then is set ourselves up to reference things that don't even exist, our program's going to crash and it's going to suck. But the reason that doesn't matter in this case is because we know our server's running, we know that it has a name, and so when we call this, we're not going to get an error. Hopefully that made a little sense. Maybe it didn't, but okay. The other thing I wanted to note was that this scan, the start scan function, it's blocking. So for 5 seconds, this whole program is going to stop, and it's all it's going to do is scan. And once the scan has finished, then the rest of the code is going to execute. And that's important because we're making reference to this P target device, which is nothing until this scan is done, right? This is not referencing anything until the scan's finished and we found the device. Now, again, here we're saying, hey, go ahead and connect to P target device. But what if, I don't know, what if our server was turned off and we never identified a device to attach to, right? Or to connect to, right? So this P target device would just be uninitialized. Well, then again, our program would be crashing because we'd be trying to connect to something that doesn't even exist. So before this connect call, you might want to check, hey, is P target device not null? And then once you're sure it's not null, then you go ahead and connect to it. Anyway, again, I'm leaving some of those guards out because I want to try to keep the code a little bit more concise, but I don't know. So now that we have got this code written, I'm going to go ahead and open up the serial monitor window. Okay, and what I'm going to do is press the reset button on my ESP32 board that's acting as a client. Okay, so I just reset it. Okay, so now we've got all our scan information, right? This is all that scan we just did. And then it says, hey, look, target service found. So we found that service we were looking for. And then it says BLE advertised device found, right? So this is, again, we're performing our scan. Then we get to the CIA monitoring device and it says, yep, hey, that was the target service. Now it continues the scan, finds one other device, but then we look, we show that we're connected, and it says we connected to the CIA monitoring device. And if you look at both of my ESP32s, the one acting as the server and the one acting as the client, the LED has turned on. And the reason it turned on the client is because this onConnect function was called. Hey, when I connect, go ahead and turn that onboard LED. So the LED's on. I had code in the server that also turned on when a client connected to the server. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go up here. And we created our client. Nice. We created the client callbacks. We turn on an LED when it's connected to the server. We turn off the LED. I set the pin mode. We connected to the server. Man, okay. So all we've got left to do is read the characteristic values from our target service and characteristic. Okay, and you know what? We actually already set these. I guess I jumped ahead. I didn't need to set the target characteristic, but I already did. Okay, so now we just want to read the value from the target service. Like, hey, it's cool to connect to servers and stuff, but I mean, what we really want to do is read information, right? We're trying to build some interesting information sharing network here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set it up so that we can read the value that our service is advertising. And if you'll recall, the server's advertising how much time in seconds that it has been running. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then we'll talk about it. Check out the description for hardware and training we recommend you use for this ESP32 BLE library. Now, if you want to watch the next video in the series, check out this video right here. Or if you want to see the full Monty, all of these BLE videos stitched together into one mega one, you can check it out right here. Either here or here. Either here or here.